Welcome back to Differently. Today, I have the founder of the Leadership Wellness Group. She's a certified health coach and yoga therapist, Monica Bodurka. Am I saying that right?
Bodurka, but you can be creative with it.
Bodurka. Welcome
Yeah.
to the show. So excited to have you.
I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation.
Likewise. So, you have a fairly new book called A New Way to Be Becoming Resilient One Breath, Habit, and Moment at a Time, which I just absolutely love because I'm such a believer in just the small steps, the small choices that we make every single day ripple to those larger changes and also builds like sustainable way of living, right? So I love this. We talk the same language. So tell us a little bit about that book and what inspired you to write that book. Why you? Why that book?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. What inspired me to write the book? Do you know what? I think it's like a child. I was saying earlier, I kind of birthed this baby, like I think most
Yeah.
authors feel. And I had been teaching programs on resilience, and often people would say, you should write a book. This is amazing. And it wasn't until COVID that people actually started saying it. And I met a publisher, and it just kind of went from there. And
Mhm.
because I already had a program, I was like, okay, there's a framework, and it was these things call you. So it called me, and
Yeah,
and I answered.
I love
It
that.
wasn't easy, though. It wasn't easy, but yeah.
Well, and we talked about you work with a lot of people who are overwhelmed and burned out and tired and juggling all the things. Was that you at one point that led you to yoga and wellness, or was there a pivotal moment in your life that had you seeking these things in your life before you started teaching them?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I always say we teach what we need to learn.
Yes.
So I was, I always say I'm healing from the hustle. I'm healing from people pleasing. I'm healing from perfectionism. I'm
Me
healing
too.
from all these things, right? I'm like trying to, well, not trying, I am rewiring my neural pathways to become a new person. That's why I named my book A New Way to Be, because it is a new way to be. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I did all of it. I sort of didn't listen to myself, and I pushed through everything, and definitely felt overwhelmed and on the verge of burnout, especially when I have two daughters and when they were little, and I had a big job, and I loved the job. Actually, it was an amazing job, and I worked with amazing people, but it was a lot, and I wanted to do it perfectly, but then I wanted to show up as a mom perfectly, and I wanted to be a perfect wife, and of course there's my parents and the extended family and friends, and well, something has to give. So I remember at the time feeling like like I actually remember I have one memory of coming home from work, and I live in Toronto, and so
Mhm.
fairly big city. It was taking the subway home, and I had to get off the subway and sit on the curb. I had no energy. I was like, what's my, like, I was so fatigued. I was so exhausted. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, what, like, this can't keep going. And yeah, so, and I was also I was working at the University of Toronto, heading up these executive leadership programs. So I was talking to C suites from across the country and the US. And, we're learning about, we're doing all this focus testing. What are the leadership capabilities leaders need in the 21st century? And resilience kept coming up as, number one. And, at the time, nobody really knew how to teach it. Nobody really knew what it meant. But I started digging into it,
Mhm.
and health and well-being and being true to yourself and having energy and learning that you actually generate energy, that you don't have
Mhm.
energy, all that stuff. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
living according to your values and understanding your priorities. I was like, wait a second. Control Alt Delete.
Yes. Wow, that's beautiful. So tell us a little bit because I know that your approach to resilience or your philosophy or the way that you look at it is kind of a reframe or a redefine. And I'd love for you to initially like let's talk about that. What does that look like from your perspective?
Sure. So that's a great place to start. So again, in my book and in my courses, we reframe resilience, and it's not to say that the Webster Dictionary is wrong, right? The Webster Dictionary says that resilience is about flexibility and bouncing back to a certain perspective. And that's what we learn. And that's the popular understanding of resilience. And, in sort of the natural sciences, a metal is considered resilient if you can bend it and it will come back to shape, right?
Mhm.
And I apologize because my dog is barking and I hope
That's
you can't.
okay. We like to keep it real.
Perfect. So that's kind of the Webster Dictionary. However, when you look at the world today and how volatile and chaotic and disruptive it is, right? Like there's constant disruption. Now we have AI. I felt like 2 weeks ago we had COVID. You've got the election going on. Like there's wars. Like there's so much chaos, volatility, uncertainty. The
And we're aware of it all in a level that we right.
Right. Well, that's it, right? Like we're the information is like we can't even process it all. So in that kind of world, what are you going to bounce back to? Like there's nothing to bounce back to. What are you there, right? So when you have one adversity, something happens. Yes, how long does it take you to come back to feeling like yourself? That's one thing. But in
Mhm.
that world of constant chaos, bouncing back isn't really what it's about. It's really
Mhm.
about being centered in the storm, right? I akin it to having shock absorbers in a car. So the bumps in the road are there, and often we don't foresee the bumps, right? But the ride is a little bit more easy. It's a little bit more smooth. It's a little bit more graceful because, again, we've built these shock absorbers, right? Another really good analogy is like having a charged battery. So, really simple analogy, right? Especially when we relate to with our phones. We charge our phones, let's say, every night. If you don't charge that phone and it doesn't die right away, those apps start working not as well, things are less efficient, it's dimmed. So that's what happens to us, right? We become less efficient. We can't perform at our kind of optimal level. So what that tells us is we have to engage in practices that help cultivate those shock absorbers and charge our battery, right? And that's not it doesn't come naturally in a world where we've been taught to not listen to ourselves, in a world where success is often associated with a lack of boundaries, and even the word business is busyness. When you think about it, right? So yeah, so we have to unlearn it, and I think I shared with you earlier. A foundation or a big aha for me was the American Psychological Association indicates, this is evidence-based research, that resilient individuals have habits, behaviors, they have thoughts and actions that make them resilient, right? So suddenly we have an understanding this isn't just an innate quality or an innate trait that some fortunate few have and others don't. No, it's actually it's actually something we can build through intention and through repeated micro practices,
Mhm.
and start to feel better, right? A lot of this is actually about feeling good.
Yes, yes. Well, oh my gosh, there's so many places I could go, but I wanna talk about resilience for a second because as you were talking, it reminded me before COVID, I remember like my husband and I were standing in the living room and some guy was on the TV talking about the most important thing that we could be preparing our children with is resilience. This was before COVID and I don't know why that stuck with me, but it's kind of part of what we live and teach in our home and also in my work. But
Right.
I have thought about that so many times since then, how true that was. Um, and that you're right. It's a different approach than just that bouncing back, but it's this thing that you can lean on every single day. And similar to your story, my story led me to, I was so externally focused. Like, if I could just manage all these things and these people would behave differently or this would change, then I would feel better. And
Yeah.
that was exhausting. That never worked. And I went, 25 years ago, decided like, oh, you mean there's like, I could pay attention to things inside and that would make everything out here more easy to manage and navigate and I think that's what you're talking about and that is the core of what I teach too, Monica. And it's you don't have, I think like we were talking before we hit record that all these pressures and things that we're trying to manage and juggle. But if we turn our approach inside instead of outside, and we do these few things, it has an impact on all those other things.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're teaching too. And so this resonates so incredibly well.
Yeah, it's really unlearning what we've been taught collectively, right? Like
Mhm.
I often think I look at my children. I have two daughters; they're 13 and 15, and I see even in school, right? You are taught to do the homework, and you have to be a good girl, and you have to submit, and you have to do the homework, even if you're
Get a
tired. And
good grade.
you got to get a good grade, and you have to be nice, and you have to do this. And it's I don't know. There's a I'm not saying
Programming.
there's a programming, and so you continue and then you go on to college or university and you get married and you do all these things, and you don't there's like I was saying to one of my daughters yesterday, well, what do you want, right? Like,
Mhm.
what do you like, so it's, and we've lost that. And then sometimes, people say, okay, they're having a midlife crisis, they wake up and they're like, oh my god, what do I want, right? And then they're burnt out, right? So if we could start that a little earlier. But I want to say something. There's a lot of really neat research on resilient kids, and this actually relates directly to my book and my program as well, because what a lot of people don't realize when we talk about the habits, behaviors, thoughts, and actions of resilient individuals, the, the first ones, in a way, or the foundational ones, are physical. They're not even, we don't even touch the mindset yet, right?
Mm.
It's physical. So Sean Archer, who's got actually an amazing TED talk, which makes me laugh, and he actually is like a positive psychologist. But one of the things he's written about, and there's a Harvard Business Review article about this, that a well-rested child is a resilient child.
Mm.
It's all about sleep, right? So it's very interesting when we start with people, often we start with sleep. And it's
Mm.
interesting because I often tell the story of this woman I worked with who was, kind of in her perimenopause, menopause years, but she was an executive director of a very large organization, very big job. And she said to me, I'm on the verge of burnout, blah, 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 blah. But she also shared that because of menopause, she hadn't slept in 5 years, she said, which I know was a little strange.
Exaggerated, right?
Could be really standing right now. But anyways, but what happened is we actually didn't take on everything else. We actually put a pin in all those problems she wanted to sort of tackle. And I said, well, let's tackle this. And it turned out she was staying up at night till around 11:30 on average on her work emails in bed. So there's a couple of things happening there, right? She's getting blue light at night in her eyes. She is stimulating her cortisol and adrenaline, because it turns out those emails, they weren't warm and fuzzy emails. She was usually, you know, putting out some kind of fire. On top of that, her dear husband of 20 years was lying beside her in bed watching the news. Well, we know the news is not really, some optimistic, positive kind of reinforcement thing. So there they are being blasted with blue light, blasted with negativity, stimulating their adrenals and their cortisol levels. Then they shut off those lights and they try to fall asleep. Now,
Expect to go to sleep.
it was like, so of course we hadn't slept for 5 years, quote unquote. And I said to
Wow.
her, I said, okay, well, let's play, because remember, play is a part of all this, because we've forgotten to play. So I said, let's play. And I said, well, let's, and we negotiated. And again, she's the client, right? So I'm meeting her where she's at. So what did she want to do? But we did negotiate that she would put all this stuff away, not work on emails, not bring her phone into the bedroom at all. She negotiated with her husband that he was not going to watch the news and just have a book. She picked up a magazine. Oh, and I literally negotiate with her like I do with my children. So like I was saying, okay, what if we put your phone away at like 8:30? And she was like, no. So we addicted to our devices. And anyways, ultimately we landed on 9:30. She picked up magazines. She thought she was going to have like a luxurious bath. The woman was exhausted and fell asleep and slept through the whole night.
Wow.
And she texted me the next morning, which was our agreement. And she said, Monica, I slept through the night for
Mm.
the first time in what feels like 5 years. And I said, well, let's do it again. Because then what we found out is she actually felt she had energy. So now she's generating energy. Like I said, we're power plants. We don't have energy. We generate energy through our habits, right? So it's not like, often, again, clients say, I don't have time. Well, we have a finite amount of time, but we don't have a finite amount of energy. We can generate energy. And this was, again, this was a way to generate energy for this lady.
Mm.
Amazing, because then what we do is we have to create a new neural pathway. So we repeated that. We repeated it. And guess what? What's really important for people to understand is change is really hard for us, right? Those pathways are wired in our brain. So it feels uncomfortable. And our brain's like, no, this is danger, danger. We're not going to do this, right? This is why everybody gives up their gym memberships 2 weeks into January. So what we had to do is we had to make it small, right? So it was a small thing. She was putting away that phone. And because she texted me the next day, she got a dopamine hit.
Mhm.
I was involved. So she's telling me and her husband, we're all celebrating this. And she was training her brain that she could do what she set out to do. So that was really important, right? What we're talking about here is the neuroscience of sustainable behavior change. We're becoming people, happier, healthier, stronger people. And then when we're that, we are able to be more centered in the storm, right? So that's what she said. I was able to put out fires. I was able to enjoy the day more. She was able to show up more as her best authentic self. I can go on, but I'll stop. I don't even remember what the question was.
I don't either, but that's okay. It was really good. So how I love this idea of managing energy, right? Like I remember years ago, that was like blew my mind when I heard it. Like you could manage your energy instead of your time. And the
Yeah.
more and more we tap into that, even my husband and I kind of practice that, you really can generate energy in your life and in your marriage and in your business. And so I would love for you to speak to what if somebody's never heard of this idea or maybe they're new to it. What
Yeah.
are some simple ways that we can generate energy in our day?
Oh, I love it. So obviously, we just talked about the sleep. And
Yes,
so
that's
that's
one
really
great
important.
one.
And actually intentionally taking on sleep. So that's huge, right? And I start there because after sleep, you immediately feel like if you've had a good night's sleep, you feel it, right? So that's a big one. The other one is taking breaks and resetting our nervous system, right? So we have, just like we have a circadian rhythm, right? Our sleep wake cycle, we have an ultradian rhythm. So basically our energy goes up and down, and it cycles through it's different. We're all bio individuals. So for each person it's between 90 and 120 minutes where we have this kind of up and down. So what that means is if you kind of are at that point where you're cycling down, you should be taking a break. And the break doesn't have to be a long time, right? Like for example, again, the study I read, there was a study of it was like 474 CEOs, and they found that on average, and these were like high performers, and they were taking a break on average every 50 to I think 70 minutes. And that break, it didn't matter how long it was,
Mhm.
because they asked them about the breaks, and the breaks were on average between 4 and 17 minutes. So it didn't matter how long the break was. What did matter was the nature of the break. So you actually had to completely separate yourself from work for that little time period, right? So you step away from the desk, you get some water. I actually will go, because I love yoga, I will do let's say a series of sun salutations. Step outside, get some sunlight, ground your feet on the grass if you can, like do something completely different, right? And I also teach something called a 60-second pause, which is one of the problems we have right now when we're sitting at computers all day. Is this is what we're doing, right? We look like monsters, actually. Right. So it's like what that does, what that sort of form, when our body takes that form, we are signaling our nervous system. And what we're doing is we're signaling that we're depressed, and not, we have to be safe, right? We're almost closing off our diaphragm, which means we can't take a deep breath, and we're signaling again that we're not safe. So what you can do at
Wow.
that 50-minute mark, or at that 60-minute mark, and I tried to make it really simple for my clients. So I called it ABC. So again, I said, A, align that spine, right? So I've gone from this. So now I'm aligning that spine. I lengthen that spine. The spine is like a super highway. So it basically is this communication between all your nerves from your whole body through the brainstem into your brain, into your prefrontal cortex. So when your spine is aligned, you actually can tap into your prefrontal cortex more, which is fabulous if you want to be good at rational thinking and creativity. So anyways, A, align your spine. So pull your shoulders back, maybe tuck your chin a little bit, lengthen the area between your ears and your shoulders, right? And then B, take a deep breath, right? So now you've opened up your diaphragm, right? So now you can breathe into that upper abdomen. So you breathe in and you breathe out. You want to breathe in through your nose because, again, we're signaling when we're breathing in through the mouth. We're telling our nervous system we're actually running and we're in danger. So trying to breathe in through our nose and breathing out through our nose, or you can breathe out through like pursed lips, right? It's again to lengthen. You want to lengthen that exhale. And when you lengthen the exhale, so when you have a slightly longer exhale than inhale, you are signaling and sort of tapping into that parasympathetic nervous system. Now, I'm talking a lot, but this actually takes very little bit of time because what you're
For
doing is you're
sure.
lengthening the spine, right? Tuck your chin a little bit, lengthen the spine, take a deep inhale into your upper abdomen, right? And then C is calm, or even you tell yourself to calm. We instruct ourselves. Or if you're a little bit more open, C can be chant. And what I mean by that is when you make sound, you're not only on the exhale, you're not only extending that exhale, but you're also kind of stimulating your vagus nerve, which again taps into that parasympathetic system. So again, if somebody wants to do this, again, align the spine, inhale, ah.
I love that. So simple.
So imagine if you do this every hour. Step away from the desk, do it, and again, you don't have to make sound. Nobody even needs to know you're doing this, but doing this every hour. I use the Pomodoro technique to remind me. I set a timer every 50 minutes. It goes off, and again, and I'll do this, and it feels great. And it helps to prevent that dip in energy. When people reach for the cookie and the coffee, this
Yes.
helps to prevent it.
Yeah.
And oxygen. Right? So again, if you're falling, like you feel like, oh, get some oxygen, do 10 jumping jacks.
Like, take a 5-minute walk. Yes,
Go
there's so many
in the
things.
sun, sun
Yes.
is energizing, right? Like all of that. And it doesn't have to take a long time. That's why I say these are micro practices. People say to me, I have no time. I have no time. I'm like, that doesn't, just 1 minute, 1 minute.
Yeah,
It's more
we
about
all have
training.
time for it.
Put up stickies. That's all I do. I put up stickies to remind myself, and until it becomes a habit ingrained in our brain, right? So.
Yeah, I hope you listening are writing this down. This works. For many, many years, I was crouched over at my desk, stomach
Mhm.
clenched,
Yeah.
like, my stomach would really hurt at the end of the day, like, and I didn't understand why because I was holding my breath a lot, like, just so intensely focused, and I've really been diligent about just changing my posture in which I work, like,
Yeah.
to be in a relaxed posture,
Yeah.
and it's been amazing what it changes, and like you said, these simple breaks, like I have weights in my office and I'll just turn on a song and I'll just dance and do weights for 5 minutes. And
Totally.
like those micro breaks are so key
Yeah.
to, yes, you have to stop for 5 minutes, but I would argue that it gives you more energy
Oh,
and you're more effective after.
absolutely. And you know what? It's not just you saying this, it's Harvard. Harvard's doing amazing work in the area of what they've called work recovery. Lots of great articles, lots of great
Mhm.
research that shows that, productivity, efficiency, everything skyrockets when you take breaks. But the break
Yes.
has to be a real break. You actually have to step away from your desk. You actually can't think about your work, right?
Yes.
Even when you hear about people going to the gym and they go to the gym with a colleague and they talk about work, guess what? That doesn't count because your mind is still, it's not recovering, right? So you really want that break. And yeah, so they're doing great work and it's real. And they're also showing when people don't take breaks, what happens is the work quality goes down and the incidence of accidents really skyrockets.
That
So
totally makes
yeah,
sense.
Yeah.
Well, and I just wanna highlight you saying, like, that you can't be thinking about work because I think that is so key that it's like it's a surrender. It's
Yeah.
surrendering your mind, and for me, it's been like my addiction to, like, keep thinking about my work, and it has been in that surrender. It can be like 5 minutes, but
Oh,
that surrender is what allows the restoration and the energy to go back up. I
mhm.
totally have experienced that.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's
Absolutely.
awesome to
It's
hear
like
you
a
saying that.
superpower, right? It really, really
Yes.
it's small, and that's why I call it a micro practice, right? And and there's other things you can do that are also really micro, and people love this.
Well,
Look
yes, please teach us a few
so
more.
things like noticing where you spend time. So, for example, I'm a tea drinker, so I have to boil my kettle. Well, guess what? That's a good 60 to 90 seconds where I could do breath work, right? And I do, right? So it's kind of silly. And so again, align my spine, and then I will do some active breathing, which
Mm,
so again, I can take mindful breaths when I'm waiting for the shower to turn on. Oh my God, there's another great time
mm,
where I can again engage in breathing exercises. So noticing, in the car, don't talk to a colleague if you're coming home from work. Put on something else. Sing
mm.
while right? Because again, you're stimulating the vagus nerve and it's releasing all these feel good hormones, right? There's all these really fun, small things you can do. It's all about resetting your nervous system.
It's like the in-between moments,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess. And there's
yeah.
so many in the day that we can lean into without feeling like we have to give up something else or we need all this ample time. You don't.
Well, that's what people would say. I don't have time. I don't have time. And even little things of like you're walking into a meeting or you're coming home from work. So you're that transitioning from work to home, and maybe you have kids and all this, holding that handle, door handle, and taking a deep breath. Right, there's a mindfulness there. There's an intention. So deep breathing, holding that handle, and kind of remembering who you want to be, leaving work behind, and now stepping into your new role. Right, just that. Again,
Mm,
is that 10 seconds? It's not, but
yeah.
we have to train ourselves to do this, and it really does have an impact. And then what ends up happening is people start kind of waking up, right?
Mm.
We're often asleep. We're just running, running, running. So we don't, we're almost not making good decisions for us sometimes. We're saying yes to things we should be saying no to because we're not in tune with ourselves. When we start doing these practices, what ends up happening is your intuition starts to come online, your self-awareness really augments. You're like, wait a second, like, so it's really it goes beyond just having more energy. um,
That's so beautiful. I have 2 questions based on what you just said. One is, so if it really is true that we have all these micro in between moments where we can harness this time and energy to do these things, then that leaves us with not really an excuse, right? Of like the old excuses of time. And so if someone is still feeling resistance to these things, where do you like to work with someone in that situation?
mhm. It's really it's interesting because again, everybody's individual, right? So it depends.
Yes.
People have resistance to different things. So it's really about what their vision is for themselves and who they want to be. Often resistance is fear, right? So it's fear of the unknown or fear of, oh, if I let go, um, everything's going to fall apart.
Something's gonna fall
Um,
apart.
right? And it's like, and I always say, well, fear is like false evidence appearing real, and it's in this moment we're safe. That's why mindfulness is such a good place to start as well, because it's like in this moment, hey, I'm fine, right? So I can take that breath. Or if somebody doesn't even want to take breath, they can just notice the sound around them.
Mhm.
So again, it's very different, based on the people or even teams I'm working with. So I usually start with like little assessments of and you kind of figure
Mm.
out what people want
Sure.
to but yeah, well, the other place actually is overwhelm. So if there's resistance, It's because people are overwhelmed.
Mm.
And I have a program called the Certified Resilience Coach Program. It's now going into the 16th offering, starts tomorrow. It's actually accredited by the International Coach Federation. And so what we do in this program is, before we even get into resilience enhancing habits and thinking about how we can help our clients and our teams do that, we actually deal with overwhelm. Because when people are overwhelmed, they can't think straight. And so that's actually where we start with resistance. And how do we deal with overwhelm is really through creating priorities, right? To know, it's back to Stephen Covey's First Things First. What are, I don't know if you ever saw in the 80s or 90s, he's got this great
I
video
did.
of the jar, the three jars, right?
Yeah,
And it's hilarious because the woman, she's got the big, like, cup, like,
shoulder pads are
it's hilarious. But the point is for anybody who doesn't know that, the jar, he has this woman, Stephen Covey has this woman add all these rocks to the jar, and of course she can't fit them all in. And then he says, well, take the three big rocks first.
Mm.
So she puts the three big rocks in the jar, and then she's able to put in all the little rocks around it. So with overwhelm, right, you have to identify what your priorities are. And then you focus on those. And what that allows you to do is say no to the others, right? I often tell clients that you have to start with the what not to do list. Yeah,
So
I
true.
was a people pleaser. That's all I couldn't say no. But then that meant I was putting myself always last, and hence, why I got burnt out, right? And so yeah, coming back to those priorities, if somebody's resisting, coming back to creating boundaries, what not to do,
Mm.
and just, it's not that you're not going to do those things ever. It's just, what are your, let's say, three needle movers for the week, even, I feel,
Yeah.
help clients. So you'll get to those other things. It's just not today, right? And that helps, because I find a lot of people I'm working with, they've got like all the zillion things right now. So I'm like, okay, let's brain dump them, and then let's find out what are the three, or even better, one, right?
One.
The
Yes.
Gary Keller book, The One Thing. What's the one?
Yes.
What's the
Love
one
that
thing?
book.
Well, when you get that one thing, there's a dopamine hit. You feel good, and
And then you usually get more done. Yes.
you get more
So
done.
true.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question. You mentioned like serene, graceful, unwavering resilience. I'd love for you, as we close, to just paint a picture for us of what that is so we can imagine it in our own lives.
Oh my goodness. Well,
Mm.
um, to me, it's really about, like I said, it's that being able to be calm in the storm. But more than that, I think it's being able to become and be that best version of yourself you've imagined, right?
Mm.
So we all have that little version. I say that's the version that we had, that image that we had of ourselves when we were 17, right? What you were going to be. And then meanwhile, life happens and you're like, oh, I did. And I don't mean in a superficial way, I mean in the
Yeah.
authentic way, right? And so when you have resilience, to me, it means you have vibrant well-being, right?
I love that.
Right. So it is about that vibrant well-being. It's being able to show up as your best self. It's knowing who you are. It's being authentic. Again, being able to say no, and then what you say yes to, you're present, right? So there's a presence. There's a 100% presence. Your mind isn't in
Mm.
17 other places. You are here. You are present now. And guess what? You are in joy. You're enjoying yourself, right?
Mm.
And so and I think we have forgotten joy as adults, right? We've forgotten to play, we've forgotten to have fun, and it's very hard to be anxious or overwhelmed or depressed when we're laughing, right? So vital well-being, laughter, enjoy, and actually that makes you resilient. It's like a
Mm.
self-fulfilling prophecy. It makes you
Yeah.
more resilient, and then and so on and so on. So
Wow, I love that. That is so beautiful. What a beautiful way to close. So before we finish, I want you to make sure that people listening know where to find you and what you're doing and where they can get your book.
well, okay, they can find me on our website, leadershipwellness.ca, because we're in Canada. My book, I've got a copy here for you.
Ah,
Um,
that.
so, A New Way to Be. It's available in like something crazy like 39,000 different book outlets. But
Wow.
Amazon is good. Barnes and Noble, like everywhere, right? Everywhere online you can find it. So yeah, and on my website you can get a downloadable free workbook companion with a lot of exercises. Because again, this isn't about intellectually knowing this. We know all this already. This is common sense. No
Practice.
common practice. So what I would love for you to do is not even read the whole book. I mean, I'd love for you to read the book, but take on one or two or three of the practices and really integrate them in your life, right? And have more energy. That's great. So yeah, the companion little workbook is on my website. You can download it for free. And again, really fill out the challenge exercises, do them, find a little buddy. It always helps when you have a buddy to do it with, to hold you accountable and have fun.
Amazing. I think our world needs this so much right now. Just the tools to calm and reflect and get quiet so we know how to lead in this world that we're navigating. So I thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing. And thank you for this conversation. And yeah, I hope you have a beautiful day, everyone. And thank you, Monica, again for joining me.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.